1 Timothy chapter 5 is a fascinating study. It's a discussion by Paul on how to take care of widows. And as we get on down into the discussion, starting in verse 11, it says, "But refuse to put younger widows on the list, for when they feel sensual desires in disregard of Christ, they want to get married, thus incurring condemnation because they have set aside their previous pledge." Talking about widows who pledged themselves to celibacy, to serve, and then find out that maybe the natural desire and inclination, the God-given desire to have children and to be in submission to a man and to procreate, is more powerful than they thought, right? So Paul says, at the same time, they also learn to be idle as they go from house to house, and not merely idle, but also gossips and busybodies, talking about things not proper to mention. He's saying they need to be busy. They need to be at home making babies, taking care of babies, raising children. So he says, "Therefore, I want younger widows to get married." And actually the word widow right here, I believe, is supplied. I think the word that's actually there is young. I think there's nothing, the young, and it's implied women, widows, to get married, bear children, keep house, and give the enemy no occasion for reproach. Here's the challenge. The young women, they were being the body was being persecuted at that time. There were more women than men. Where is a young widow going to find a husband? Because he says elsewhere that they're to be married only in the Lord, in the faith. So where is she going to find a husband? See, monogamy-only language can't solve that. However, if we look at what Scripture actually says, there's an easy solution. Polygyny is the solution, and Paul is arguing for that here. He continues in verse 17, "The elders who rule well are to be considered worthy of double honor, especially those who work hard at preaching and teaching. For the Scripture says, 'You shall not muzzle the ox while he is threshing, and the laborer is worthy of his wages.'" Now, Christendom will take verse 17 and say that means you need to open your wallet up and give something to the preacher. But that's not what Paul is saying. What Paul is saying is that the elders are the ones that should be considered most worthy for taking on these younger widows. And he justifies it with two passages of Scripture from Deuteronomy. One comes from Deuteronomy, or the first comes from Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 4 and 5. And it begins, "You shall not muzzle the ox while he is threshing. When brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, the wife, the widow of the deceased, shall not be married outside to a strange man. She's to be married only in the Lord." This is what Paul is saying. And so he's instructing them that those young widows need to be taken in by a brother, and they need to bear children. "Her husband's brother shall go into her and take her to himself as wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her." I cover this in much more detail in two papers that are on academia.edu. One is Paul's perspective on polygyny, and the other is Jesus's perspective on polygyny. Both papers are in the 10 to 12 page range. Very fast reads, but they explain using multiple passages of Scripture and historical context that both Paul and Jesus advocated for polygyny. They had no problem with it. You can simply search in your search engine, Academia, Pete Rambo, and those papers will come up. Paul practically applies the Torah to the scattered ecclesia that was being persecuted. Persecution was common, as well as a shorter life expectancy for men. Hard work, hard days, the whole 9 yards. The best way for a young widow to be taken care of was polygyny. he draws his solution directly from Deuteronomy. Polygyny is the solution according to the Apostle Paul. If this has blessed you, please make sure that you like, share especially, and subscribe. And we appreciate your comments. Use the QR code on the screen to access a blog that has many resources for study and understanding. It will take you to natsav.com/biblical marriage. And that will give you many more resources in addition to this YouTube channel. For King and Kingdom, I bid you shalom.